Before I start today, I want to do something a little unusual. I'm going to put my phone away. Not off to the side. Away. Somewhere it can't hear what we're talking about. Because today's topic is whether or not your iPhone is listening to you right now. And I want to be fair. I don't want to say anything in front of my phone until we've had a chance to discuss this properly. So, phone is away. Today I want to tell you about 5 urban legends connected to the iPhone. Some of them are funny. Some of them are surprisingly touching. And the last one you can try yourself tonight, after you finish watching this. I'll warn you in advance, don't be scared. Let's start with one that most people have already heard. Because even if you know the answer, I think the story itself is worth telling properly. The year is 2014. You're scrolling through your social media feed, maybe Facebook, maybe something else, and you see an advertisement. It looks official. It has that clean, minimal Apple aesthetic. White background. Sharp photography. The kind of ad that makes you think, this is real. The ad claims that the new iOS update, iOS 8, has introduced a feature called Wave. And what Wave does, according to this ad, is allow you to charge your iPhone using a microwave oven. 60 seconds in the microwave. Full charge. The ad even had a little disclaimer that said something like, compatible with iPhone 6 and above. Deep cycle charging. Safe for internal components. It looked completely real. And hundreds of thousands of people tried it. You already know what happened. The microwaves destroyed the phones. Some of them caught fire. Some of them simply died. A few generated small explosions. Apple issued a statement clarifying, obviously, that you cannot charge an iPhone in a microwave. Now here's the thing that fascinates me about this story. This hoax spread almost entirely through Asia first. It was particularly viral in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean social media before it reached Western platforms. And I think there's a reason for that, not because people in Asia are more gullible, but because the relationship with Apple products in East Asia has a particular intensity. Apple in Asia isn't just a phone brand. It's a symbol. Status. Modernity. The idea that Apple would unveil a revolutionary new charging method in an iOS update, that's exactly the kind of thing people want to believe. And that desire to believe is what the hoax exploited. If microwave charging had actually worked, if it were somehow physically possible, the person who invented the microwave oven would have become one of the most famous figures in consumer electronics history overnight. Overnight. Because every household in the developed world already has a microwave. But of course it doesn't work. Microwaves don't produce the type of electromagnetic energy that charges lithium batteries. They produce the type that destroys them. The physics are completely incompatible. So why did so many people try it? Because they wanted it to be true. Because the promise, quick, wireless, effortless, is so appealing that the brain finds ways to rationalize the plausibility. That's not stupidity. That's human psychology. And it's relevant to everything else we're going to talk about today. I want to go a little deeper on why the microwave hoax worked. Because I think it tells us something important about the way we relate to technology, and specifically to Apple. Think about what Apple had done by 2014. They had introduced the iPod, which changed music. The iPhone, which changed communication. The App Store, which changed software. The iPad, which changed computing. Each time, the product did something that felt impossible until you were holding it in your hands. Wireless music from a device that fit in your pocket. The entire internet on a glass rectangle. Applications built by anyone, purchased from anywhere, running on your phone. Each of these things seemed implausible before they existed. And each of them was real. So when someone in 2014 sees a clean, minimal advertisement claiming that iOS 8 can charge your iPhone via microwave, the brain runs a quick calculation: is this possible? And the answer the brain arrives at is, well, Apple has done impossible things before. Apple invented wireless. Apple put a supercomputer in your pocket. Microwave charging sounds crazy, but so did the iPhone in 2006 before Steve Jobs walked out on stage and showed it to the world. The hoax exploited the credibility Apple had built by actually being revolutionary. This is important. The microwave hoax could not have worked with a different brand. If someone had published a fake Samsung ad claiming microwave charging, fewer people would have tried it, because Samsung's cultural position doesn't carry the same association with the genuinely impossible made real. Apple's reputation for magic created a vulnerability. People were willing to believe the impossible because Apple had delivered the impossible before. And I find this genuinely interesting, because it means that the more successful a company is at changing the world, the more susceptible its users are to misinformation about what it can do next. Trust, extended too far, becomes credulity. There's something worth sitting with there. The people who melted their phones in 2014 weren't stupid. They were people who had been taught, by years of genuine Apple innovation, that the impossible was probable. Their mistake was applying that lesson too broadly. Not to something genuinely revolutionary, but to a fake. The lesson is not be more skeptical of Apple. The lesson is that trust is a substance that can be misused by others, and by our own pattern recognition instincts. Every time you believe something quickly and easily, especially about technology, especially about brands you love, it's worth pausing for 1 second and asking, am I believing this because it's true, or because I want it to be true? That's a question worth carrying with you beyond this video. I want to add one more thought about the microwave story before we move on. The people who believed it weren't wrong to trust Apple. They were wrong to extend that trust without verification. And there's a difference. Trust is reasonable. Blind trust is a vulnerability. The habit that protects you is simple: before you act on something surprising, ask one question. Where did this come from? Not as cynicism. As curiosity. Because true things can usually survive a moment of scrutiny. False things, like a fake ad promising microwave charging, tend to dissolve quickly when you ask who made it and why. That habit costs almost nothing. And it would have saved a lot of iPhones. Let me tell you about a phone call that Apple support reportedly received many times after the iPhone 7 was released. The caller would say, "Hello, I bought an iPhone 7 and I took it into the shower with me, and now it's not working." And the support representative would say, "I'm sorry to hear that. The iPhone 7 is splash resistant, but it's not waterproof. Taking it into the shower would likely cause damage not covered by warranty." And the caller would say, "But I saw an ad that said it was waterproof." And this conversation, or variations of it, happened enough times that Apple had to address it publicly. The iPhone 7 had an IP67 rating, which means it can survive submersion in up to 1 meter of water for up to 30 minutes under controlled laboratory conditions. It is not designed to be taken swimming. It is not designed for showers. Hot water, soap, pressure, all of these can compromise the water resistance over time. But the marketing around IP67 created an impression that was stronger than the specification. People heard water resistant and their brains translated it to waterproof. They took it in pools, in bathtubs. Some people, genuinely, believed they could take underwater photos. And when their phones died, Apple support heard about it. I find this particular legend interesting because it's not really a hoax the way the microwave story was. Nobody faked an ad. Apple's water resistance is real. The legend is the gap between what the specification actually means and what people wanted it to mean. That gap, between specification and desire, is where all of today's legends live. Now let me tell you about the Apple Watch. And this one, I promise you, is not fully a legend. Parts of this are completely real, and the parts that are speculation might turn out to be real within your lifetime. When Tim Cook unveiled the Apple Watch in 2014, he talked about its sensors. The watch had an optical heart rate monitor, an accelerometer, a gyroscope, GPS. Later versions added ECG capability, blood oxygen monitoring, fall detection, temperature sensing. The official Apple position was, these sensors help you understand your fitness and manage your health better. But here's where the urban legend begins, because it didn't come from nowhere. The rumor started circulating that Apple's long-term vision for the watch wasn't fitness tracking. It was comprehensive medical monitoring. The sensors in the watch, extended and improved over generations, would eventually be capable of detecting cancer markers in the blood, irregular heart rhythms that predict strokes, early signs of Parkinson's disease, the first molecular indicators of infection before you feel symptoms. Not as a diagnostic tool to replace doctors, but as an early warning system. A constant, passive, always-on monitor that would catch things before they became dangerous. And here's what's strange, this is not entirely a fantasy. Apple has filed patents for sensors capable of measuring blood glucose non-invasively, which, if achieved, would be genuinely revolutionary for the 400 million people in the world with diabetes. Researchers at Stanford have published studies showing that Apple Watch data can predict atrial fibrillation with significant accuracy. The ECG feature on Apple Watch has genuinely saved lives. People have had heart attacks detected by the watch and gotten to hospitals in time because of it. So where does the legend end and the reality begin? The legend version goes like this: Tim Cook's real vision for the Apple Watch is not a fitness tracker. It's a medical device that will eventually monitor every vital sign, every biomarker, every subtle change in your body's chemistry. And if that vision is fully realized, if the watch can detect cancer in stage 1, can identify Parkinson's before symptoms appear, can catch infections before they spread, then people with Apple Watches might, effectively, live significantly longer than those without. The legend ends, and this is the part that sounds most fantastical, with a reference to Tim Cook saying in an interview that Apple's greatest contribution to humanity would not be the iPhone. It would be its contribution to health. He actually said that. Not as speculation. In an interview. And then the legend extends it into philosophy. In Greek mythology there's a figure named Tithonus. He was a mortal who the goddess Aurora fell in love with. She asked Zeus to grant him immortality, which Zeus did. But she forgot to ask for eternal youth as well. So Tithonus lived forever but continued to age. He became smaller and smaller, more and more fragile, until he could barely move or speak. And Aurora, who loved him, eventually turned him into a grasshopper so he could at least keep making sound. The legend asks, if the Apple Watch gives us longer lives, will it give us better lives? Or will it give us Tithonus lives, extended existence without extended vitality? That question is worth sitting with. I don't think anyone at Apple is promising immortality. But I do think that the sensors in your Apple Watch, or whatever its successor will be in 15 years, will know more about your body than your doctor does. And that knowledge will change what it means to get sick, to age, to die. Whether that's a legend or a prophecy, I'm genuinely not sure. I want to spend more time on the Apple Watch health story, because it's the one on this list that I find most genuinely profound, and the one that's most likely to become real within the next decade. Let me tell you what the Apple Watch can already do that most people don't fully appreciate. The ECG app on Apple Watch Series 4 and later can detect atrial fibrillation, an irregular heart rhythm that dramatically increases stroke risk. The app has a medical-grade clearance from the FDA in the United States. This is not a wellness feature. It is an FDA-cleared medical device worn on your wrist. The blood oxygen sensor can detect patterns consistent with sleep apnea. Apple Watch Series 9 has fall detection. If you fall and don't move for a minute, it automatically calls emergency services. multiple people have survived accidents they would have otherwise died from because their watch called for help while they were unconscious. These are not legends. These are documented. People are alive today because of a watch. Now let's talk about what's coming. Apple has been working for years on non-invasive blood glucose monitoring. This would be genuinely, profoundly revolutionary. Currently, people with diabetes have to prick their finger multiple times a day to check blood sugar levels, or wear a sensor that requires a needle inserted under the skin. A wrist-worn optical sensor that could do this continuously, without any invasive element, would transform diabetes management for hundreds of millions of people. The technical challenge is significant. Blood glucose levels are hard to measure optically through skin. But the patents exist. The research teams exist. The commercial incentive is enormous. And there are longer-term research threads that are even more speculative but genuinely being pursued, biosensors that can detect inflammatory markers in sweat. Algorithms that can identify the early acoustic signatures of developing cardiac events. Temperature patterns associated with infection. The vision, which Tim Cook has articulated publicly and which you can find in Apple's research and patent filings, is a future where your Apple Watch notices you have an infection before you feel symptoms. Catches cancer markers before a tumor is visible on a scan. Detects the early biochemical signature of neurological disease years before symptoms appear. Early detection is the most powerful tool in medicine. Most diseases that kill people are survivable if caught early enough. Stage 1 cancer has survival rates above 90% in many cases. Stage 4 cancer has survival rates in the single digits. The difference is almost entirely detection timing. A device that consistently catches cancer at stage 1 would be, there's no other word for it, one of the most significant medical advances in human history. More impactful than antibiotics in terms of lives saved annually. This is what the Apple Watch urban legend is reaching toward. Not immortality in the literal sense, but a world where death from preventable or detectable causes becomes significantly rarer. Is it a legend? Right now, partially yes. The full vision doesn't exist yet. But is it heading toward reality? I genuinely believe it is. And when it arrives, if the Apple Watch or its successor becomes a continuous medical monitor capable of catching the diseases that kill most people, the story won't be told as a technological triumph first. It will be told as a human story. Someone will say, "My watch told me to go to the doctor. I almost didn't go. The doctor found something. I'm alive because of the watch." That story is already being told in a small way, with the ECG feature. In 10 years, it might be told millions of times. That's not a legend. That's a future that's already being built. Here's an experiment that a researcher at Harvard decided to run. They went to Google Trends, the tool that shows you how often specific search terms are entered into Google over time, and they looked up the search phrase iPhone slow. And what they found was striking. Every single year, in September or October, right around the time Apple announces a new iPhone model, searches for iPhone slow would spike dramatically. People all over the world, simultaneously, would notice that their current iPhone seemed to have gotten sluggish. And they would search for an explanation. The pattern was so consistent it was hard to dismiss as coincidence. Now, there are two ways to interpret this data. The first interpretation, Apple is deliberately throttling the performance of older iPhones around the time of new product announcements in order to push users toward upgrading. The second interpretation, when a new iPhone comes out, people who haven't been thinking about their phone's performance suddenly become aware of it. They compare their old phone to the new one in reviews and advertisements. They notice things they never noticed before. The phone hasn't gotten slower. Their perception of it has changed. For years, Apple denied doing anything to slow older phones. Then in 2017, a user on Reddit posted benchmark tests showing that his iPhone 6s had dramatically improved performance after he replaced the battery. And Apple, facing the data, admitted something it had never admitted publicly before. Yes, they were throttling processor speeds on older iPhones. But not, they insisted, to push upgrades. To prevent unexpected shutdowns. The explanation was technical: older lithium batteries can't deliver consistent peak power. When you demand maximum performance from a phone with a degraded battery, the battery can't supply the current, and the phone shuts down without warning. Apple said they implemented a feature that automatically reduced performance to prevent this, without ever telling users it was happening. The backlash was significant. Multiple countries launched investigations. Apple eventually settled lawsuits in several jurisdictions and offered discounted battery replacements. The legend that Apple was secretly slowing phones to force upgrades turned out to be partially true. Not for the reason people suspected. But the effect was real. That gap between Apple's stated intention and the experience users actually had, that gap is something I keep coming back to. And now I want to talk about Face ID. Because this one sits in a particularly interesting place between urban legend and documented reality. When Apple introduced Face ID with the iPhone X in 2017, they explained how it works. The phone projects 30,000 invisible infrared dots onto your face, maps the geometry, and uses that map to unlock the phone. Your facial data, Apple said, is stored locally on the device. It never goes to Apple servers. It is protected by the secure enclave chip. It cannot be accessed by third parties. The urban legend that emerged said, that's not all the data is being used for. Think about what Face ID actually collects. It maps the precise three-dimensional geometry of your face. The distance between your eyes. The shape of your nose. The depth of your eye sockets. Every time you unlock your phone, that data is used. Every time. Now combine that with where we are heading as a society. In many cities, particularly in China, but increasingly in cities everywhere, facial recognition systems are deployed at a large scale. Cameras with AI capable of identifying individuals from a database of millions of faces, in real time, in public spaces. These systems need reference data. They need a database of what faces look like, specifically, accurate three-dimensional maps of facial geometry. The legend asks, what if the data collected by Face ID has a secondary purpose? Not malicious in the way conspiracy theories usually are, but as part of a broader infrastructure for facial recognition that will eventually be used in ways users never consented to. Apple denies any involvement in surveillance systems. They have, in fact, been among the more vocal technology companies opposing certain forms of facial recognition in law enforcement. But the question the legend raises isn't really about Apple's intentions. It's about what becomes possible when hundreds of millions of people have voluntarily provided precise biometric data to a private company, and what that data could be worth, or what uses it could be put to, in a world where governments and corporations have increasing interest in knowing exactly who is where at all times. I'm not saying Apple is building a surveillance network. I don't believe that. I'm saying that the technology now exists to do exactly that. And we put our faces into it voluntarily, cheerfully, because it's faster than typing a password. That's worth thinking about. I want to push harder on the Face ID question. Because I think most people dismiss it too quickly, and the dismissal is comfortable in a way that concerns me. The standard reassurance is, Apple stores your facial data locally. It never leaves your device. The secure enclave protects it. Apple has strong privacy policies. And all of that is true, as far as we know. But here's what I want you to think about. The facial recognition systems that are currently deployed at scale in public spaces, the cameras in airports, train stations, cities, those systems require databases. They need reference images to compare against. They need to know what faces look like. The traditional way of building these databases is through government ID systems. Driver's licenses. Passports. Criminal records. But those databases are incomplete, poorly formatted, and often outdated. Face ID data is, by any measure, among the highest quality facial geometry data ever collected at consumer scale. It uses 30,000 infrared dots. It maps in 3 dimensions. It updates continuously as your face changes over time. I'm not suggesting Apple sells this data. Their privacy policies say they don't. Their business incentives suggest they don't. I'm saying this data exists. It exists on hundreds of millions of devices. And the question of who has access to it, under what circumstances, and what could compel a company to provide access, is a question worth taking seriously. Governments have compelled technology companies to provide user data before. In the United States, the FBI attempted to compel Apple to create a backdoor into an iPhone following a terrorist attack in San Bernardino. Apple refused, and the FBI ultimately found another way in. But the attempt was made. The legal pressure was real. In China, where Apple manufactures its products and has a significant user base, laws require technology companies to store certain data on local servers accessible to the government. Apple complies with Chinese law, as it must to operate there. The facial recognition infrastructure in Chinese cities is among the most extensive in the world. It uses AI to identify individuals in real time across thousands of cameras. I want to be clear, I am not claiming Apple is part of that system. There's no evidence for that. What I am saying is that we live in a world where the gap between this data exists and this data is used in ways you didn't consent to can close quickly, in certain political environments, under certain pressures. And the urban legend, the story that Face ID has purposes beyond unlocking your phone, is, in a way, more honest about that gap than the official reassurances are. The reassurance says, your data is safe. The legend says, how do you know? I don't have a clean answer to that question. But I think the question is better than the reassurance. Questions keep you paying attention. Reassurances put you to sleep. Stay awake. And now we get to the last one. This is the one you can try yourself. But before I tell you how to do it, I want to set up the context. Because this legend is different from the others. The others were things that happened to people or that affected their devices. This one is about something that might be happening right now, in your room, while you watch this. The question is your iPhone listening to your conversations? Not when you say, "Hey Siri." Not when you activate the voice assistant deliberately. But passively. Always on. Processing ambient audio for keywords or topics and using that data to target the advertisements you see. The answer Apple gives is no. The microphone is not always on. Audio is only processed when the wake word is detected. Your conversations are not used for advertising. Apple's privacy policies explicitly prohibit this. Now, let me tell you about some experiences people have reported. A person in California had a conversation with her sister about planning a trip to Japan. She had never searched for Japan, never visited a Japan travel website, never mentioned Japan in any text or email. 2 hours after the conversation, she saw a Japanese airline advertisement in her social media feed. A man in the UK was talking to a colleague about a brand of running shoes he was considering buying, a brand he had genuinely never searched for online. That evening, an advertisement for exactly that brand appeared in his Facebook feed. A woman in Australia discussed her interest in adopting a cat with her partner, a conversation, she said, that had never been typed anywhere, never searched, never mentioned in any digital context. Within 24 hours, she started seeing cat food advertisements. Now, the scientific explanation for all of these experiences is coincidence, combined with cognitive bias. When something remarkable happens, when an ad appears that seems eerily relevant to a private conversation, you notice it and you remember it. You don't notice or remember the thousands of ads that are irrelevant. You don't track the conversation topics that never generated corresponding ads. Your brain is, by design, a pattern recognition machine, and it will find patterns even in random noise. The more rational explanation is also worth considering. These companies know an extraordinary amount about you already. They know your location, your search history, your purchase history, the content of your emails if you use Gmail, the content of your posts, the people you communicate with, and what they're interested in. Combining all of this data produces such a precise profile that ads can appear to be eerily relevant without any ambient audio collection at all. If you always carry your phone to the same coffee shop, and your phone knows that, and you've searched for espresso once in the last year, and your friends have searched for espresso, you might get coffee ads that feel like mind reading. But no one read your mind. That's the rational explanation. And yet, the cases keep accumulating. Researchers have tried to test this directly, putting phones in rooms where specific topics are discussed and monitoring for corresponding ads, and the results are genuinely inconclusive. Some tests show no effect. Some show correlations that are hard to explain through coincidence alone. In 2019, a class action lawsuit was filed against Apple claiming that Siri recorded private conversations and shared them with third parties including advertisers. In January 2025, just this year, Apple agreed to pay $95 million to settle the case. Apple did not admit wrongdoing. But they settled. $95 million. That's not what you pay to settle a case you're certain you'll win. Here's the experiment. Take your phone. Place it on a table somewhere nearby. Within conversational range. Don't mute it. Don't activate anything. And then talk about something specific. Something you have never discussed online. Something you have genuinely never searched for. A product. A destination. A very specific item. Talk about it casually, the way you'd talk about it if you weren't doing an experiment. Mention it by name. Say you're thinking of getting one, or going there, or trying it. Then wait 24 to 48 hours. And watch what appears in your social media feed, in your shopping apps, in your recommendation algorithms. I'll tell you what I found when I tried this. I put my phone on the table. I said, completely casually, as if to myself, that I was thinking about getting a fish tank. That I'd always wanted fish. I described the specific kind of fish I was considering. I had never searched for fish tanks. Never looked them up. Nothing. 48 hours later, a recommendation for a specific brand of fish tank filter appeared in an app one used regularly. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe. But I found it harder, after that, to feel entirely comfortable leaving my phone on the table while I have certain conversations. And that discomfort, that subtle, persistent awareness that you don't fully know what's being recorded and what isn't, is, I think, the real legacy of this particular urban legend. It doesn't matter if it's true. It's changed how we relate to our devices. We whisper sometimes. We leave phones in other rooms. We talk around things. We've accepted, on some level, that the device knows things about us. And we keep using it anyway. That's the interesting part. That's the part one think about. We know, or suspect, that we're being listened to. And we continue the conversation. Think about what that says. Sleep well tonight. And maybe, just maybe, put your phone in another room first. Let me tell you the most uncomfortable version of the eavesdropping story. The most uncomfortable version isn't the one where Apple is secretly recording your conversations and selling the data to advertisers. That version is bad, but it's comprehensible. There's a motive. There's a transaction. You can understand why it would happen even if it's wrong. The most uncomfortable version is different. The most uncomfortable version is, the eavesdropping isn't happening. And the personalized ads still feel like mind reading. Because the amount of data these companies have about you without any audio is so extensive, so granular, so precisely calibrated that they can predict your thoughts with remarkable accuracy. This version says you don't need to listen to someone's conversations to know what they want. You just need to know who they are, where they go, who they talk to, what they've searched, what they've bought, what they've watched, and what time of day they're most likely to be receptive to a suggestion. Combine all of that data and you get a model of a person that is, in some ways, more accurate than that person's own self-model. Because algorithms don't forget. They don't get tired. They don't rationalize. They just track patterns. The advertising technology that has been built over the last 20 years is, in effect, a system for predicting human desire before the human has consciously formulated the desire. That is not science fiction. That is the stated goal of behavioral advertising. They call it predictive targeting. The idea that they can show you an ad for something before you even know you want it, based on patterns in your past behavior that correlate with wanting it. If that works, and there is significant evidence that it does, at least probabilistically, then the eavesdropping question becomes less interesting. Why would you bother recording conversations when you can predict their content from behavior alone? And this is the truly unsettling version of the legend. Not that they're listening, but that they don't need to listen. That the data they already have is sufficient to simulate listening, to produce the same result. Your phone knows when you wake up and when you sleep. It knows how long you sit in one place and when you start moving. It knows who you call and how often and for how long. It knows what you search for at 2 a.m. versus what you search for at noon. It knows the emotional content of your messages, not necessarily by reading them, but by patterns in length, response time, emoji use. That data, processed by sufficiently sophisticated machine learning, is a portrait of a human being that is extraordinarily detailed. And you gave all of it voluntarily. Every morning when you unlock your phone. Every time you open an app. Every step you took while carrying it in your pocket. I've been thinking about this for a while. And I keep arriving at the same place. The legend of the always listening iPhone is, in a way, too simple. It imagines a specific, deliberate, surveillance-minded act. Someone decided to listen to you, and they did. You were targeted. You were monitored. Reality is stranger than that. You weren't specifically targeted. You were modeled, aggregated, predicted. Not as an individual person with a name and a face, but as a behavioral pattern in a data set of billions. You are, in the most literal sense, a data point. That sounds dehumanizing. And in some ways it is. But here's the thing, data points can be understood. They can be analyzed. And understanding how you appear in that data, what patterns you produce, what your behavior predicts about you, is, in a strange way, a kind of self-knowledge. The phone knows things about you. Some of those things you already know. Some of them might surprise you. I find it useful, occasionally, to think about what a good behavioral analyst could infer about me from my phone data. What patterns would they see? What would those patterns say about what I value, what I fear, what I'm seeking? Not to be paranoid, but to be honest. Because the phone is, in some ways, a mirror. A very patient, very accurate mirror that doesn't lie to you the way your memory does. That's the real legend of the listening phone. Not that it spies on you, but that it knows you. Sleep well. And give your phone a moment of thought tonight, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. What does it know about you that you haven't looked at yet? One more thing I want to say before we finish tonight. The 5 legends we talked about tonight have something in common. None of them are purely false. And none of them are purely true. They exist in the space between what technology actually does and what we imagine it does, between what companies claim and what they might be capable of, between the reassurances we're given and the questions those reassurances don't fully answer. That space, the gap between what we're told and what we can verify, is where urban legends live. And I think urban legends deserve more respect than they usually get. They're often dismissed as misinformation, as ignorance, as the mistakes of people who don't understand technology. But what I see in the legends we talked about tonight is not ignorance. I see intuition. I see people noticing that something about their relationship with their devices feels uncertain, unequal, opaque, and reaching for stories that give shape to that feeling. The microwave hoax spread because people sensed that Apple was capable of things that seemed impossible. The waterproofing myth spread because the fine print of IP67 ratings doesn't match the marketing imagery. The Apple Watch legend spread because people understood, instinctively, that a device measuring your body continuously would eventually know things your doctor doesn't. The slow down story spread because people felt a change in their phones and no one was explaining it honestly. And the eavesdropping story spread because people felt, in their bones, that something about the relationship between their conversations and their ads was not coincidental. In each case, the legend was a more honest account of the feeling than the official explanation was. That's worth something. I think that's worth a lot. Pay attention to what makes you uncomfortable about technology. Don't dismiss it as superstition. Take it seriously enough to ask the question. Because sometimes the urban legend is just ahead of the documentation. Good night.